review because I've served over 4 years in prison. I even have the letter here, but
this is very important because there are many people who experience similar issue, a conviction. If you remember, a couple of years ago, there were people being removed from the UK, being deported, and it was said that, oh, they committed a crime, and if the sentence was more than 12 months, that was justified. And many people were wrongly removed from the UK. And there were people who were on the deportation list that did not have a criminal record that was removed from the plane. So this story is not unique in itself. There are many other stories like this out there. Because we've had this conversation on our Windrush Q&A and also Sunday chat, where people have come on the platform and tell us, right, they're past what they did past, and yet that is held against them, and they can't move on with their life. And what this man has achieved since that situation, people, many years ago, they had a program called Second Chance. You could turn your life around, as many people did. So I won't say any more on this. Natasha has made a note of it, and we'll try to get this up the agenda to the minister. Absolutely.
Why? Not penalised a bit in the next, not those. If the Home Office thinks people who have been convicted shouldn't be compensated, why wouldn't that apply to all schemes?
Yeah. And one of the things that I raised directly with the Home Secretary in Brixton was in relation to equity across the scheme. So Post Office scandal is one I give direct to Yvette Cooper. I said there is no parity there at all. And what we've seen, the way the government have dealt with those different schemes. I mean, yesterday, you probably saw the news about Southport and public inquiry, etc. And I'll come on to an inquiry later on. But the fact of the matter is that Windrush should not be treated any different from any of the other scandals. And that's the point I've been pushing. There needs to be equity and fairness across all the schemes. And we don't see that. Just the example I gave to Yvette Cooper in October is this. The interim payment for Post Office Horizon scandal is 600,000. Can I repeat that in case people didn't hear? 600,000. The interim payment or the offer for Windrush is, does anybody know what it is? 10,000. But do you know how long it took us to get to 10,000? It started at 250, and we fought to get it to 10,000. And still, there's no parity. So we can see clearly, I don't beat around the bush. Clearly, it's discrimination. Right? And clearly, the historical roots report released on the 26th of September confirm all of these things. Okay? I'll take question later. I just want to focus before we lose Natasha. Welcome, Glenda. So thank you very much for giving us your story, an insight into your story. I hope your story would be the catalyst to move things forward. And we will continue to support you and to fight to get policy change around criminality. Yeah. That is something that is very important. Thank you for sharing. I hope that wasn't too painful to go through.
Thank you.
Glenda, you just come in, but this gentleman, it may be a good point just to introduce. So Glenda Caesar from Windrush Lives, and also a live experience person on Windrush. Many people have seen Glenda on different platforms talking about her experience and the fight with the Home Office to get, her compensation. And she's now supporting many other organizations and individuals with their claim, and particularly around advocacy. This is the work that help individuals with their claim. The Home Office think, you can just read the instruction, fill the form out, and that's it. And we know that's not the case. Even lawyers find it difficult with the rules, etc. So, Glenda, this gentleman has just relayed to us his experience in the criminal justice system, and he's been penalized for having committed a crime. I'm not going to say any more than that. Yeah. They haven't made a decision yet on his case. They have
as
to,
a claimant.
as a claimant. So I mean, I have to refer it on, as it were.
Wins last second year.
Yeah, yeah. So
Can I just ask you, so what's your name?
Eugene.
Eugene.
I'm more than happy to reinstate it again, please.
Yeah.
You put the claim on this, you've obviously done it in and you put in a claimant. What are they rejecting from you?
Because they've been 4 years, the decision now, all of this did not be reviewed.
And because your sentence was over 4 years, so it wasn't. Your sentence to 4 years, and they refused over 4 years.
I was released in 2012. I haven't seen
No, me.
the cell walls in such a long time. And all this is here on this last 5 years. What have you done since you? It took them 9 months. But I already asked them that. The phone calls to sort of Facebook. Every time I made a phone call, they so month 6 I've already sent them all the details. I thought that's the only
The number one question. I've had I don't like to call it claimant, let's put it that way, someone I assisted who had done a sentence, came out, and as he came out, he'd done his sentence, was ready to go to probation, had a job and set up, and as he stepped out, they arrested him. Well, they didn't arrest him, they took him straight to the immigration unit, and they kept him there for a further, it was 9 months, and they refused to even acknowledge him as a person who had been affected by all of this. And yeah, I did have to fight with them for it, but I was able to get him the additional money for keeping him there, because he had fought his case while he was inside. And then when he came out, what they wanted to, they tried to use, because he was within the system already, but what they had realized that he was en route to being released, and then they recaptured him. So there is a way. I don't know if you've got any legal system. Have you got anybody legal helping you?
I'm not getting to. Thing is, you cannot bring in legal help until you get refused.
Right, and they haven't refused you.
No, I mean, I'm not being refused. So I represent myself. So, and this is the issue. I'm not firing.
Right,
And this is my claim.
right.
So that you give it the help. I'm the only one who refused that.
As a close family member.
It's a really big issue.
Yeah, can we talk afterwards?
Yeah,
And then we'll swap
I'm
details.
just going to pause it for a minute because I'm conscious of the
Yeah,
time.
sorry.
My
So
MP is
sorry.
going to be departing shortly, then another MP will be coming in. But I just want to give Natasha an opportunity to say something before she leaves. So Natasha is the MP for East Croydon, and she does have cases of Windrush. So Natasha, can I just give you the last few minutes before you depart?
Hello, yeah, I'm Natasha. It's actually Croydon East. I don't want you to Google it and then end up at the train station, but it's my constituency is Croydon East. I was elected in July, so I'm very new to this. We have had a couple of cases coming in through the compensation scheme. We've had one claimant who was awarded their claim and was told that they would be able to claim back for legal costs, and then found out that that is not something that this covers. My team and I started looking at this, and we're a bit concerned as to how is this, again, this is the only compensation scheme where legal costs aren't covered. We had a case yesterday where somebody is in quite a lot of distress and doesn't know where to turn, doesn't know where to get legal advice. We were trying to encourage them to get legal advice, and we would help in any way we can, but they just didn't know what to do, and they've been suffering on for years and years and years and been rejected and not sure what to do. So I've been an MP for a matter of months, and even in that short space of time already, you can feel the injustice through the messages that we're getting and through the stories that we're hearing. I'm trying to clue myself up as much as I possibly can, as quickly as I can. I need to really, I want to be able to sit down and look at every compensation scheme and do a comparison on a spreadsheet and see, you got it? Can I have it? Can you send it to me?
Yes,
Please,
please.
please. Yeah, no, exactly. Please send it over to us, because what was helpful for me is, as a new MP, is to understand what it is I'm asking for, what it is I'm lobbying for, what it is I'm fighting for, to be very clear and very specific and very on the money. And it's, justice denied is justice delayed, right? It's not, it's justice denied. So we can't continue on in this vein. Commitments were made, and we need to fight for those commitments. And I'm trying to carry on that fight. I just need to know specifically what it is I'm pushing for, because this needs to come to an end. But thank you so much for allowing me to come here today. Another MP should be coming in very shortly. I can stay for about another 10 minutes, but I've got to run off to another meeting.
Just stay until Barry comes in.
Yeah, and then but
someone
again,
should ask the MP
for
why is it that an African event like this has been denied access to the technology. I know they can't hear me in the room.
Particularly around Windrush, but she wants to do something. It's always good to find the new ones, the fresh ones that have fire in their belly, want to do something that the others, they've been there too long. Okay? Kimberly, please.
I have to leave it.
Yes. So I'm going to bring you in now. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I need to get Kimberly in because she's going to give us an update on the work that Action for Race Equality is doing. This is very important work. No, sorry, I've got to do this because she's got to leave. So can I introduce Kimberly McIntosh from Action for Race Equality? She will tell us what Action for Race Equality is doing in this Windrush space along with other people, because I know there's a collaboration. And in particular, we want to know, since the manifesto that was produced, where you're going with Windrush now, please.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Great. Oh, amazing. Thank you. So, hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly McIntosh, and I'm the Windrush Policy Manager at Action for Race Equality. Briefly about the work that we do. So we have a program called the Windrush Justice Program, where we fund small grassroots groups and organizations that support people with their Windrush claims to either the Windrush scheme for documentation or the Windrush compensation scheme. And some of the people that we fund in this room, and we work closely with important people in this space, such as Glenda, who is on our independent panel that looks at our applications. We work closely with Patrick Vernon as well, who's obviously...
And incidentally, Patrick sent the apology because he's happening at the moment tonight, that's why
he can't make
here.
Yeah. And something that we did last year was work with lots of people who are in this room and who aren't in this room on a Windrush manifesto. So we came to this event a few times and asked people, what is it that they want to see the next government do, so that within the first 100 days, we know that they're taking serious action to bring the Windrush scandal to an end. We launched that manifesto around Windrush Day last year, and following the manifesto, Labour, who wasn't in government yet, committed to a few things that they were going to do in government. So that was to appoint a Windrush commissioner, to open up access to the compensation scheme, and to re-establish the Windrush unit. As we've heard about earlier already, the Windrush unit has been re-established, and there's also been an announcement of this 1.5 million, which will be grant funding, which will be used for advocacy support. So this is the people, again, who are supporting people with their claims to the schemes. This will sit aside alongside We Are Digital, which I'm sure a lot of people in this room know isn't fit for purpose, doesn't work, isn't in the areas where people need the support, where the key demographic groups live, and isn't culturally competent. Unfortunately, that contract is still going, but they also announced this 1.5 million. And that was something that was actually in the Windrush manifesto. So we're glad to see that that is going to be enacted. Some of the big questions now are who will be able to apply to that funding? What do they mean by advocacy? Will it be able to include law centres? And these are the kinds of questions that we're trying to get clarification on. So what we've done since the manifesto and since the change in government, our CEO attended the roundtable that was mentioned earlier to talk about two things, mainly reconciliation events and the Windrush compensation scheme. Our CEO also met the Minister Seema Malhotra in November, and that was to talk about this advocacy support. Because we also have an advocacy support program. We're sharing what we've learned over the past 2 years from our program and what we think is important for them to consider. I'm not from the government, so I just want to clarify that it doesn't mean they'll do what we say, but at least they are engaging. This is a big shift from what we had before, so that is welcome. The things that we don't know and we're trying to get clarification on are the timeline for delivery of the lessons learned review recommendations. We were told that there was a commitment was made that they're going to be delivered, they're going to be implemented. We don't know how, which will be important, and we don't know when. The plan to open up the compensation scheme, again, what's the timeline for that? What does that mean? What will a review include? We don't know. The Windrush Commissioner role, we know that it's going to be in the spring that someone will be in post, but we don't know what the terms of reference to that role will be, what the job description will include. And one big thing is that we're having a lot of one-to-one meetings, different groups, but there doesn't seem to be a plan to communicate more widely. So people are hearing different things and getting updates one-on-one, and then that information isn't getting out to everyone, which is causing frustrations because we all need that information. It shouldn't be based on one organization who has a stronger relationship than another organization or is better funded. We all need to know what the government's plans are. So in light of that, we had a meeting earlier today with Paulette Hamilton, the MP for Birmingham and Erdington, and she is going to be writing to Yvette Cooper and Seema Malhotra to try and... So what is the government going to do? What is the timeline for delivery? And how communicating not just with organisations like the one that I work for, but also advocates and survivors, so that it isn't just kind of more mainstream people who are finding out what's going on. In what we're going to be working on this year, we want to do more campaigning around the Windrush Manifesto, on the things that government haven't committed to. So the things that we're going to be focusing on are how we can support other people campaigning on legal aid. That's already come up, that's one of the most important interventions that will make one of the biggest differences to the success rate of claims and the offers that people get and the size of them. A public inquiry, there's been quite a lot of discussion about whether we should have a public inquiry or not. So we're going to bring different Windrush stakeholders together to have a conversation about that. Windrush is the only state scandal that doesn't have a statutory inquiry. Infected Blood has had a statutory inquiry. Lambeth Children's redress scheme, Grenfell, Post Office, all of them. And so why has Windrush not had, why have people who have been affected by the scandal not had the same opportunity to talk about their experiences, to get legal support for their claims, and to have their day as everyone else has had. And we're also going to be looking at influencing local government. So we've got some local elections coming up this year, and a lot of the advocates and the groups that we fund have relationships with their local government so that they can better refer people into their advocacy services. So we're going to create a 2-page document aimed at local government with one of our groups on the programme, Claudia Jones' organisation, which is Sabir here. Hi, Sabir is over there. So she has their organisation, she's a great relationship. And so we're going to use them as a case study examples. Provide a better service to people who might be affected by Windrush and to plug them in to local advocates who are looking for support. We will also be ahead of the anniversary in April of the scandal breaking into public consciousness, not for the people affected. We'll be launching kind of a quarterly update that we want to send to MPs, which will be kind of what they can do to campaign on Windrush to try and build some more support to a wider group of MPs. It's great to see you here today because, to be frank, it's quite hard to get new MPs on board to support Windrush, particularly now it's not in the news cycle as much. And so any support, any ideas about how we can build momentum around it, we really welcome. And then another thing we really want to focus on is having a blueprint for the things government have committed to. So we have a new government and they have committed to do things. We don't know when they'll be delivered. We're trying to find out, but it's also a huge opportunity for us to shape what that response looks like. And we want that to come from people who are either advocates or are survivors, as well as other experts like law centres. You know, what is it that they're going to do reconciliation events. We all have lots of different views on whether that's something that should happen or not, but it's there. What do we want? What do we want a government to do? We should have an answer for that. And we're doing a survey which is out at the moment, and I've got some leaflets here if you're interested. Got a QR code on it, and you can scan and put in what you think the government should do. So that will be around reconciliation events and whether we should have a public inquiry and what that should look like, because we want to have as much input as possible from people who are working and campaigning and have been affected by this. So if you want one of these, I've got them and I can hand them out. And we'll also be launching a 1-year review from when we launched our manifesto last year. So that will be looking at... that is reminding me that let me hurry up and finish. But yeah, we'll be launching something reviewing 1 year since the manifesto. What has the government done and what is there still left to do? So if anyone wants to, I do have to leave in 4 minutes, but I can give out my email address.
Thank you, Kimberly. There's 2 questions for Kimberly before she reads. Is there any question directly from what Kimberly has just said? Yeah, there on Liz and then later behind you. Those 2, please.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. We say about the MPs now, you know, we've got two MPs here. MPs want to one their constituents, are doing lots of work. My MPs were intended to do that. But this is exactly the work, and the rest of them will feel you're individually feel like you're on your own. And if we don't pick the stories up and pick these issues up, then we're ultimately going on to our MPs. So if the MPs sit together and form a committee where they say their staff perhaps bring all the cases they've got.
Just to say, that's already started. Right? That's already started. So it doesn't matter adding more names.
And then the other thing about I mean, obviously I'll do the survey, but our brother kind of shares the story with us. And that story is behind nearly all the impacted individuals of what it's done to their children. You know, whether it's mental health or unemployment or working off the books.
Liz, I'm going to stop you. I need to get the question in. Yeah. Before you.
That is the reconciliation that we bring youth work into community and bring something material as a legacy thing that we can take on, as opposed to again bit here.
Right, thank you.
Sorry.
Can I take the final question for Kimberly, please, and then we'll move on. Just raise your hand.
He applied for the Windrush application so what we covered is
the issue that I would like to raise is that if we're going to look at the effects that it's had on the children, the effects that this has had on the families, it's going to snowball into something really magnificently big. So I just don't think that that this is really prepared. This is just the tip of the iceberg, because this issue is coming from about, say, the 1400s. So it's stemming from slavery, systemic racism. So I just wanted to ask one question. If these, the direct question that I'm making, sorry, I just wanted to give you the background. The direct question that I'm making is that for people that have been affected in their education, this stems to hospital treatments, it stems to work, housing. So it's a determinant of health issue. I think that all these issues have to be dealt with because this is what has impacted on the Windrush generation. So thank you.
Response. That's what I don't want to just go around in circles. We understand what you've said about the impact, yes, but I want a very specific question. Is there a final question to Kimberly, please, before she goes? Oh, wait a minute. Anybody online? Well, come on, I need a question.
I have a question, Garrett. I'm online with a question. I don't know if you can hear me.
So Glenroy is online.
Monitoring? Yeah, I've heard Kimberly said about the money being allocated for advocacy. How much of it is actually going to be added to compensation?
No.
Because even though we
nothing,
know that they've
nothing.
not...
No,
right.
no.
So
the 1.5 billion
Go ahead, Claire.
Has nothing to do with compensation.
Yeah, so the answer is nil.
The answer is no.
Yeah, none of that is going to compensation. That's a separate pot of money. Yeah. Right, Kimberly, thank you very much. Some of the points that you've raised, I will continue because we're going to talk about the inquiry, so I will continue that conversation. But at least we've been updated by Action for Race Equality and where they're moving since the manifesto was launched prior to the election 2024, and the work that they're planning to do for the rest of the year, as well as the 12-month review around the advocacy. And so conversation already started with a number of partners around the issue of a public inquiry. And that conversation will continue with building solidarity across this agenda. It's a big agenda, and we certainly want you to support that. And as Kimberly has said, and I've said previously, we've seen public inquiry in different scandals. We've not seen anything along Windrush, so we're going to be pushing for that. Thank you very much, Kimberly. Thanks for coming, and I'll speak to you shortly. Yes, sure. Thank you. Now, we've got several speakers that I would like to present, and then that will give us the opportunity of asking questions, both in the room and also outside the room. So I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
What's this? Roland, can you? I don't know what is it. It's coming up. I'm going to ask Glenda to now give us an update.
Your Michael's like, oh, I like that, you know. I said, yeah, it's very fitness.
Garrick, this is the microphone. We're gonna resolve it, Garrick. This is the microphone. We don't use it, they can't hear us. It's important for them to hear us.
No, look, just give us a chance to cut well, sorry. So our next speaker is going to be Glenda Caesar from Windrush Live. What? I'm on the running order now. No. The timing, I'm on the running order now with the time. Yeah, I'm going by the time I've got allotted. Yeah. So it's now 6:20. Yes. So Glenda Caesar come before Q&A. So I'm going to invite you now to speak. Yeah. So can I just introduce Glenda Caesar from Windrush Lives, who's going to give us an update on the work that Windrush Live is doing, and also the other work that you're participating in with other partners. Please.
My name is Glenda Caesar. I think everybody knows that I'm a victim and a campaigner and an advocate now. And the Home Office called me a stakeholder as well, because I participate in challenging them against any of the policies that they put into the compensation scheme and the status scheme as well. I'm a director of the Windrush National Organisation, which is a collective of different organisations around the country. I'm also part of Windrush Lives, which is a group of direct people who've been victims of this whole scandal. I work alongside the Windrush Justice Clinic as well to advise. So I'm an independent person, but I'm here to help everybody who has been affected by this because of my experience. Well, I'm still finding that even though, just to let everybody know, I was compensated when this first came out. And that's because I had put up a challenge with them. And it had affected me and my youngest son, who was actually born here. But it was a fight because the scheme was it was really new when it first started. So to be honest, I don't think they knew what they were doing. So they were learning from victims who were coming forward. That's basically what they were doing. And those who had the knowledge and the understanding, I could say to them, look, this is how it should go. It made the different changes. And one of the changes that I did challenge with them was that close family members were able to get reimbursed for any funds that they helped a primary claimant with, because they didn't want to pay that out. What they wanted to do was say, well, the primary claimant got paid for that. You're not entitled to that. And we were like, no, because what we're finding as I was going along the way is finding close family members were taking out loans to support the main person who was affected. We'll just say, I was a mother, I've got children, I've got adult children, but because of the whole situation, they put me and taken me away from my job. It put me in a financial situation. So my children had to take out loans to help me. And what they didn't want to do was give the money back to people who came forward like that. So we had to challenge them on that. It took about 9 months before they then implemented living costs, where they would then reimburse you, because they were calling it double bubble. I don't think they knew what they were doing, to be honest. But coming from administration side and having to deal with issues like this on a regular basis, I understood the different dynamics of putting this all together. Hence the reason why I still sit on there. We also had to challenge them on the employment law, where they didn't want to, it's still a battle, because they're not willing to pay out on people who lost out on their personal pension, because a lot of people had to cash in their personal pension just for them to live, whereas they shouldn't have had to, because they should have been put back in the position that they were in, and they should have been able to have that money reimbursed as well. But what I've found now, over the years that this scheme has been going, is that payments are being reduced. And I have to say, the successive governments who have taken over are finding ways and means of not paying out what they should pay out. And I'm seeing it on a regular basis, regular basis, where they will find an excuse using the legislation that they're putting in now, instead of going on. So someone came here in 1969, let's just say hypothetically, came in 1969, and their country became independent, even though they were living in this country when their country became independent. What the Home Office are doing is saying, no, your country was independent, and because your country was independent, you're not entitled to compensation. And that shouldn't be, because you were living here at the time when the countries became independent. So you were a British citizen. So the claimants who are putting in shouldn't fall within that legislation. So these are the difficulties that you're having to face. And if you're not clever enough, you will fall into that. And a lot of people are coming forward saying, look, this is the letter I got. Oh, I can't get compensated. Yes, you can. You can. But hence the reason why we need advocates and we need legal people, because I'm not a legal person. I'm not immigration officer, but I've learned a lot in the last 7 years. It's unbelievable. But there's so much changes that need to be made, and we need MPs to help us to challenge this. We really do. Because if you do not understand it, or you do not work on it, you fall into this trap and you give up hope. We have a lot of people still living on the streets who have been affected by this, and they're the ones that we need to reach out to. But some of them who are elderly, because they're just living in this country and they've lived under the radar for so long, they're like, oh, I don't want it. But then that affects their parents. And I had that with 2 sisters whose mother the mother would not come forward. Now, I don't want it. But then it affected these 2 women, and they were in their late 30s. And they've only just recently got their passport. So now they can travel and leave the country. So you're trapped. You know, there's so much different legislation that you do not understand. And it's this whole scandal is affected. So we want them to realize, what we want the government to realize is, as well as the different schemes who are getting thousands of pounds just thrown at them, we have been affected. And that young lady brought up about housing. You're so correct. And that's another thing what I try to put through. Every borough that have people who's been affected by this scandal, there should be part of it where they're offered housing, they're offered funding, and they're offered some kind of care for trauma, because it is very traumatic. This affects your mental health because you sort of like give up on yourself. And it's happening every day. The amount of people who are coming forward now, because they know, oh, there is somewhere for me to go. There is someone I can reach out to. But when you hear someone say, oh, I didn't get through, then they just give up. And then many of them are dying. Many of them are in debt. Whereas they know they can get out of this. If only the government would just look on and say, look, yeah, we're going to take responsibility. Because as the post office, they're entitled to it. But this scandal was alongside Grenfell as well, when this scandal broke out. And we should have been put in the position where, like them, give us, say, all right, everybody that's been affected, so I'm going to give you 600,000 if you fall within the scheme, because this is what they've put their own little scheme in place. But everyone who would have been entitled to a status as a British citizen should be entitled to compensation, because they should have never been refused their status in the beginning.
Thank you. Stay with us, so there will be opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to try and pull the agenda back because we had to move the agenda to accommodate our first MP. And you notice we've been joined by our second MP. So this is Barry Gardner, and Barry has been a great supporter for Windrush. We can always rely on Barry to get us out of a situation if we can't find a room in a certain space, etc. So I know it's very good. But also, each MP have their own casework. And, we're always encouraging people to reach out to their own individual MP. They're there to help you, yeah? Whatever that help may be, whether it's housing, whether it's DWP issue, whether it's Windrush, they're there to help you. Reach out to your MPs. If you don't know who your MP is, just Google your postcode and you'll find your MP. So Barry will be staying with us to the end of our session, and he will speak shortly. But I just want to bring the agenda back. We've got Nadine now, and Nadine is online, or she's here. Okay. Can I bring this across to you, Nadine? Oh, okay. So you can speak from there.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. There's a bit of poetry here.
Good evening. My name is I'm a poet, and this is my contribution. With the wind. They were called to a space to fill. They were invited in. So they rushed with the wind. Helping to keep Britain great was their wish. They had big dreams to accomplish. With the wind. Some of them visited the space in a heap, one suitcase and a black face. After the war, the field subjects came to serve her. They came from another land to what they called their motherland. They didn't receive a warm welcome to integrate, although their plan was to help keep Britain great. They didn't expect what they would have to face because of their race. They rushed with the wind. Some of them fought in the war and could have been killed, but didn't receive their honors until decades later. Some of them fought in the streets of Brixton. They had to fight for their human rights. They came, they saw, they helped to rebuild. Yet still, decades later, some of them faced deportation. They were in anguish and pain when they were told they couldn't remain in a country they helped to rebuild.
What they had to face was a disgrace. The disruption of their lives because someone didn't check the archives of those who rushed with the wind. What some of them went through brought tears to my eyes. An old man was in tears. He was told he couldn't remain after being in Britain for so many years. He brought me to tears. After they served, what they got was not what they deserved. They are the Windrush generation. They have contributed greatly to this great nation. Thank you.
Those words are really important for us to just think about. Sometimes we see in writing Windrush generation is what they've done. Helped to build the NHS in 1948. We see all this stuff. What is the reality? And sometimes it's quickly forgotten. But that was like 50, 60 years ago. We're now in 2025. So we've been reminded again of the contributions to the Windrush generation. And sometimes we hear the expression Windrush generation and descendants. We Windrush generation. I am second generation Windrush. And my grandchildren are now fourth generation. So the Sicilian and many people born in the UK from here who shouldn't be experiencing these things are experiencing these things. And people always take an application for great poetry. I much appreciate it. To bring us up to date, a meeting took place, engagement, feedback from the minister, Seema. Ewan is going to take us through what that feedback is. Is he ready to give us his feedback?
Yes, I can.
He's online. Just to say, Ewan Small is an immigration practitioner, and been working in this field for a number of years. And we often come on the platform, various platforms, to assist with very specific questions around different policy, different immigration rules, etc. Very knowledgeable person, and so I'm keen to hear what the feedback is from meeting the minister.
Ewan, can you hear us?
Getting a feedback.
So I think people in the room, if you're on Zoom, turn the volume to 0 and mute. So we don't have feedback.
The volume to 0, please, in the room. Just speak mic, we'll get a better volume. Okay. So we'll come back to you in a moment. We have representation from the Windrush Justice League. We have more than one person in the room. I'm going to give the next presentation just to hear about the work that's been done with the Windrush Justice League, which is an organization coming together to support and provide guidance around first. Yeah. So can I do a the law. And she is the director. Could we just tell her what
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I work, I'm part of the India. Yes, and
yeah, just speak.
thank you. Yeah, I'm part of the Windrush Justice Clinic, which Garrett describes. So we're a group of universities. My university, King's College London, is part of them. And we also work with community groups as well. So Glenda from Windrush Lives, and also we've got Sabira from the Claudia Jones organisation, is one of the community organisations. So what the Windrush Justice Clinic aims to do is basically provide victims with legal advice and representation to try to for them to obtain just compensation. And because we're universities, we also want to try and do research which will hopefully, support the policy work, the campaigning around improving the scheme. Because as we all know, the scheme has been very bad for many years, and there's a lot that needs to be done. So I work very closely with Southwark Law Centre as well, who's part of the Windrush Justice Clinic, and they've been doing lots of cases, pro bono cases, basically offering free advice to victims, and our law students work with Southwark Law Centre to do that. So as many of you probably know, from the beginning, there's been many problems, and there's been a lot of reports, a lot of independent reports, and a lot of evidence which has shown the many problems with the system and with the scheme. So what we decided to do in 2023 is well, there's lots of evidence. How could we maybe look at this slightly differently? And basically we did some research comparing the Windrush compensation scheme to other compensation schemes. So we thought, let's look at the structure, let's look at the performance. And I'm sure many of you won't be surprised to know that the conclusions did show that Windrush was the poorest performing scheme. So we compared it to part of the post office scandal scheme, the the Lambeth Children's Home Redress Scheme, and the proposed infected blood scheme. So we focused on scandals where the state, the government, was responsible for the harm, which is just like Windrush. So, I mean, like I said, it was the worst performing. I think because we've got Barry here, I think I am just going to read out the statistics, which were from February 2024. But basically, 22% of those applying for compensation were successful at that time, and 53% were basically refused, which is a nil award or ineligible. And I know that refusal rate has gone up in the last year. So again, just a very snippet. For one of the post office schemes, there was 73% of applications were successful, with 17% refused. And you had similar statistics for Lambeth Children's Home Redress Scheme. 79% of applications were successful and 8% refused. So the infected blood scheme hadn't been implemented then, but we were looking at the structure. So when we looked at, well, what might be the reasons for all this difference in the schemes? Because sort of separately, because I do think this is relevant, there is a problem in terms of legally how the systems, how redress schemes are regulated, or how they're delivered in this country. So I suppose the main things that we found was the Windrush scheme was the only scheme that we looked at where the perpetrator of the harm was the person who was responsible for the decisions. So the other schemes, they weren't perfect, they were flawed. But for example, in the post office scheme, which has lots of problems still, there's a lawyer that works with the post office to make those decisions. the Lambeth Children's Home Redress Scheme, it was the same. So there's a real complete lack of independence in terms of that decision making. The Windrush compensation schemes, as many of you know, is really complicated. Yeah, in terms of eligibility, how do you get into the door? So we found there was this really complex eligibility requirements, which were all about our very complex immigration laws, which you know have been described by judges as sort of like impenetrable jungles. The other problem that we found is that there's this culture of disbelief and carelessness in the Home Office. So what we found with the Home Office in terms of their decision making, they seemed to be applying a higher sort of standard of proof, or expecting people to put in more than even their guidance was saying. So whereas the other schemes, there were problems, but they were better at believing the victim. Yeah. And I suppose the other two really important things when we looked at the structure was that there wasn't sufficient independent redress. So in terms of, you didn't have a right of appeal to a tribunal, where the other schemes had better ways to challenge the decision. And really importantly, there was no, and Garrick has mentioned this, Windrush was the only scheme where there was no funded legal advice. I think comments have been made about We Are Digital, or I think the name has changed now, and you know that there's been independent reviews of We Are Digital, and that is not legal advice. Yeah. There was big issues around the competency of the Home Office to make decisions about loss. So this is the whole area of law, how much loss. So they just didn't have the expertise. They're not lawyers. There's other issues about the Home Office in terms of the culture of disbelief and hostility. So I suppose this report sort of kind of highlighted the things the concerns that many victims had. And I suppose in terms of where we went with that report, what we then next did, which I think relates to sort of the bigger context about actually what needs to change for Windrush. We actually met with we had a roundtable in June 2024, where we actually got the victims from Windrush and activists and those involved. We also got people from the Post Office, the Infected Blood Scheme, and we actually came up with a set of recommendations about what a redress scheme should look like. And I think that's important because I think Windrush has lots of problems. Like I said, it's unfortunately the worst scheme as far as our research was concerned. But I think it sits in a bad system, and it's treated the worst. So I just think that's relevant in terms of thinking about some of the things that Garrick mentioned. I know there's this new commissioner. So, for example, we sent our reports to the Home Office, and they did respond actually to both of our, we said this original report about Windrush, and then the roundtable, which Glenda attended, and many others. But the problem with the response is that they do not believe that the Windrush scheme could be taken out of the hands of the Home Office. And I think that is a problem, because many of the issues that we found stemmed from the decision making. So actually it's a bigger problem. So after we had written our report, the National Audit Office actually was commissioned by the government to carry out a review of redress schemes. Yeah. So, and Windrush was included. And their finding was that it's not a good system. Whenever we have a scandal, we have to sort of make up a redress scheme. They also said that where the redress scheme is administered by the perpetrator, this is a big problem. And they actually said that this really isn't the way you should do it. So their recommendation, this is the National Audit Office, is that we need to have central guidelines which have principles as to, like, you know, how these schemes should be set up, and long term there should be a public body, an independent public body, which is accountable to, you know, there was a range of that level of detail wasn't there. Maybe the Cabinet Office, like the Infected Blood Scheme, and so you have expertise and you don't have the perpetrator of the harm administering it. So I think that is a problem. I understand what the current government is positive about potentially reforming the Windrush compensation scheme, but I think the problem with a Windrush commissioner, let's see what the terms of reference are. But the problem, I think, is it doesn't have sufficient teeth. It's not going to be able to change enough, because I think the problem is it's in the Home Office. I think the legal advice provision is a big problem. I think as an interim measure, you have to have a lawyer to assist you. Our research found, because we work with Southwark Law Centre, so we had these case studies. So our model is Southwark Law Centre have a great lawyer who's doing this work, and he's assisted by 4 law students at King's. You know, our students are very bright, and in all our cases, the clients are initially not eligible, nil award, and then the lawyer at Southwark and the students will prepare a tier 1, tier 2, and then maybe 2 years later, the client will get. I mean, we've had clients who've gone from 0 to like 80,000, and that we know that's the story, and that is with a good team of like a good lawyer, students. We're doing this pro bono. We can only do a few cases, but so I think even with legal advice, the journey is very painful. You all know this. It's very painful. It's very difficult. So I think there are solutions, but I think our research really showed us that leaving it with the Home Office is really problematic. So I think that's something that the Windrush Commissioner will need to consider. I understand the issues around delay, but I think the scheme is the second scandal, unfortunately. It's a broken system. It doesn't compare well to other schemes, which are also problematic. So I suppose where we are, I mean, there's lots of great work that the Windrush Justice Clinic are doing, but where we are at the moment in terms of King's and also the Windrush Justice Clinic is we think that there's so much evidence about the problems with the Windrush compensation scheme, but it just hasn't captured the public's imagination in the same way as the post office scandal or the infected blood, which are dreadful scandals. I mean, I researched them and they were, heartbreaking in so many different ways, just like Windrush. So one of the things that we want to do at King's with the Windrush Justice Clinic is sort of, we're hopefully going to be developing a performance which will engage different members of the public to understand the Windrush experience. So we've been working, we've got not a great deal of funding. We've got a theatre writer and a director who's been working with the Windrush community, Glenda, and many from Windrush Lives have very, very kindly given their time to talk about their experience. So we want to engage the community about the problems with Windrush, but on a more sort of emotional level. We want to engage people who we think don't know about Windrush, but would be empathetic, to try and keep the campaign going, because it's been years and years and years, as you know, but there hasn't been the change that's needed. So yeah, I mean, it's great to be in this room and hopeful for the future, but yeah, I think a great deal needs to be done.
Very much. Just going to can you just comment
Yeah, very, very happy to comment, but not only on what the sister here has said, but also to thank our poetess. It was brilliant, and it was so powerful to get the message encapsulated in the way that you did. To compress everything like that and make it so powerful was really, really amazing. So thank you for that. Back in 2018, it wasn't the victim of Windrush, it was his wife who came to me and explained that her husband had lost his job because he couldn't prove that he should be in the country. And we then began the whole process of proof. And of course, the primary school that he'd attended in the 1960s had now closed down. And so we couldn't get any information and documentation that he had attended that primary school. We eventually managed to get some records from the health, from healthcare at the time, and prove that he was in the country at the relevant period and substantiate his story. His mother had brought him as a child, and the Home Office refused the claim initially, and we fought. We had to show that he had not only lost his job as a result of this, not only had he been told that he was not a British citizen, but he had, as a result of losing his job, fallen into debt. We had to corroborate that debt by going back and finding all the books that the creditors had kept. And you know what happens, they come round each month, each week, and show exactly what debt he'd accrued. They then offered a completely derisory sum, and this is after months of work, mainly by myself and one other person in my office. His wife, he couldn't bring himself to speak about it. So deeply was he traumatized by the whole experience, losing his job, falling into debt, being completely disrespected. He was suffering. His mental health was suffering. His physical health was suffering. His daughter's health was suffering, and his wife said, "Well, if that's all they're offering, and it's, you know, in full and final settlement, then we'll take it." I said, "Don't take it." She agreed not to take it, and we then kept fighting, had to show more documentation, and eventually got a sum which was close, actually slightly above the figure, the top figure that you mentioned, that they then came back and offered. But there were, after the initial refusal, there were 3 separate occasions where they made an offer which, until we got the final one, that was worth accepting. And even then, my feeling is, you know, you get something that's less than 100,000 for that. Now, I don't in any way diminish what those postmasters and mistresses went through, but just look at the comparison. 600,000 as a blanket, and if you can prove more, then you can fight and get it. And yet we had to absolutely dig our heels in and go back again and again to get what I considered at the time, you know, to be a reasonable settlement. And in the situation, the financial situation that family was in, it was really important that they took it. So I think if I'm to reflect on what has been said today, it's that this scheme is simply not adequate. And I think the principles that you set out, or that the National Audit Office set out in its report, that you should not have the person who perpetrated the crime in the first place adjudicating what the compensation for that crime was, is absolutely fundamental. Now, look, hope, like I'm sure many of you, that with the change of government, we will get a complete change of scenario here. I've been a minister in government. 20 years ago, I served in 3 different departments. I know what civil servants do and how they try and basically persuade and bully and cajole ministers that we can't do this. Here are the reasons we can't do this. Well, we'll only get judicial review from the people who've already accepted the settlements. We're going, there's going to be legal problems. There's going to be financial problems. How are you going to square this off with your colleagues in the Treasury? I know all the tricks that the civil service play, and I am absolutely sure that they will play it, because as far as they're concerned, they just want this off their hands. It's a problem for them. And my view is that it's our responsibility now as the governing party to make it clear that if you think it's a problem for you as a civil servant, just think how much of a problem it is for all the people, all the families who've been through it. So I really, I think it was really important. I think it was you who said it, or perhaps the sister who said but when you talked of how important it is now that MPs come together and work together to try and make sure that we get it changed, because I know how difficult it was battling for one case, and we've had others, but I know how difficult it was battling for just one case, and how much time and resource it took up, and how important it is, therefore, that people get free legal representation, because it's not something that people can do on their own. It really isn't. You can't put people in that position and then expect them to fight you and provide all the documentation they need to secure what is rightfully their compensation for all that they've been through. So I think having MPs together fighting this is really important. And you said that there is a group now of MPs that are trying to do that. We need to really mobilize, I think, as a group of MPs. But also, I think what would be helpful is if everyone can get in touch with their MP and suggest parliamentary questions that they can put down. So they can table written parliamentary questions that are saying, what are the changes that are being proposed to the scheme? What's happening about what the National Audit Office said about changing the way in which the scheme is administered? So these are all the sort of questions that can be tabled by MPs. And the more MPs we get doing that, because you write a letter to your MP, right? And it will be read initially by a staff member. If it then gets read by the MP is going to look at it and say, well, what is there for me to do here? Is it to add my name to something? Yeah, okay, I can add my name to something. An EDM or something. Useless, absolutely useless. But if it's, could you ask on my behalf this parliamentary question, which would make a difference to my family's fight for justice, then the MP says, okay, yeah, I can do that. And that does make a difference, because that then goes into government. So I think there are things that the community can do which would be really proactively helpful, but will galvanize MPs to get involved. And the other thing to do is to ask them to get involved with their colleagues in the group that you're talking about.
Yes. Thank you very much for that. And just to re-emphasize what Barry has said, we've got a number of MP who are already coming together, and we're going to pull that, a group of MP and add more to it, because the issue is true. We've always been encouraging Windrush people to write to their MP, reach out to their MP. And we don't know whether they do it or not. And we don't know how many has reached out to their MPs. But please you've just heard, very specific. When you write to your MP, you're asking for something very specific, right? for him, some sort of action for him to do something. You're not just giving him information about Windrush, you're asking for something. That's very important that you make that clear in your letter. But also, you can make an appointment at the surgery and see the MP in person. Then you can talk about your issue, right? Again, find out who your MP is, what day and time their surgery, and make an appointment so you can have that one-to-one with your MP. I'll come to you in a moment. So is Ewan ready? Because I'm watching the clock. Is he ready to give us the feedback from the Home Office? Ewan, are you ready to give us the feedback? Yeah, is he ready? I can't hear anything.
Ewan, are you ready? Ewan, are you ready?
Shadis, I'll take your is there a question? Because I want question now. Direct. Oh, one moment. I want question. Yeah, I want question. Okay, let me take the question. Yeah, come on. Can I have your question, please? Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. There's a number of people who have protected myself and also see successful.
So I want question, not statements, because we have quite a bit to get through.
Thank you. So anyway, yes, I'm a Windrush activist.
Can you hear me?
I got successful compensation for my father, over £70,000 in 2021. Also for myself as a close family member and a number of my siblings. Anyway, for my questions, I think that we need to go ahead with a public inquiry. I don't think we need to ask the question. We need to kind of make an action plan of what we need to do, how we need to do it, who needs to be involved in a date by when this should be achieved. Within that public inquiry or within any of the conversations that you may have with the Home Office, Glenda, or anybody else, I would like us to put forward to them that they need to stop using the term the balance of probabilities, because in their response to many of our Windrush clients, Windrush victims, what they're saying is, despite of the evidence that you've provided on the balance of probabilities, which means from my understanding is what you're saying is not the truth. So people are providing long statements of what they've been through, evidence to back this up, and the Home Office is still saying that we don't believe you. The term balance of probabilities they need to be told that they cannot use this anymore. It's highly offensive, to say the least. So there's a question: can that be asked? Furthermore, I would like
on the Zoom hear me.
Or I would like the scheme to be developed under impact of life.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I would like a question to be asked to the Home Office about.
Come on, we've got two mic here.
Which mic's with his channel? Sorry, yeah. So I would like direct questions to be asked to the Home Office about their development of impact of life, and I would like specific questions to be asked in the application forms for Windrush compensation around the psychological impact and the social impact, aka the psychosocial impact. There's not enough questions asked around that, and what that would cover is things like family separation and trauma on you, and intergenerational trauma on the family generations and close relations, right? That's what I would like to be asked. Furthermore, I keep on hearing everyone talk about Windrush compensation, which is amazing. However, I want to remind everybody not to forget about Windrush status. People have been submitting Windrush status applications to correct their status or to get evidence of their status to be in this country, and the Home Office are taking the P with that, and they're not managing those claims within a proper, appropriate time. So we've got people applying for correction of status, which should kind of be automatic, that are still waiting. Furthermore, sorry, I just want to finish, Gareth. I've been waiting for a very long time, and I know you're trying to manage me. 2 more minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. calm down, everybody. Thank you. You're just going to have to be patient. Thank you so much, Gary. Furthermore, as well as requesting legal aid for Windrush clients for us to be represented legally, what we also need is we need people to be looking at the military pensions. So we're focusing on pensions for the community, but what about military pensions? My father came to this country 50 years ago and fought at 17 and a half in Northern Ireland and had to kill lots of people for this mother country. And we are still in a tribunal for his pension for PTSD. They've got the medical evidence. They're asking us to prove that this PTSD comes from the army. Although when he was admitted into the army at 17 and a half in 1972, it was declared that he was mentally fit. So my father can't be the only person. And I know that the white comrades that represented the army don't have this experience because my grandfather was one of them and he gets his pension without any issues. Furthermore, the Home Office will never agree to hand over the scheme. So I don't know why we're wasting time asking them. We need to have a public inquiry and have it in the recommendations full stop. Two more points. Derek, I'll speak over you or you will give me time. 2 more points. Thank you very much. There was a mention about documents earlier and a request for documents, and our friend here, our political friend here, mentioned that he struggled to get documents for one of his constituents about education. Can I advise everyone, if the school or service is closed, you need to go to the official department. So you can go to the Department of Education, where they keep records of education up to 100 years due to the Data Protection Act. Yes. Furthermore, if you have health records and your GP is closed down or they haven't kept your records over 75 years, which is the standard, you go to Public Health England, where historical records are kept. Furthermore, if you want to find records for your entry to the country, go directly to the Home Office and do a data subject access request and ask for a full request, because there's 3 types of requests and you will get all of the evidence that you need for your claims. Furthermore, the last point, thank you everyone for your patience, including Garrick. For the Tier 1 and Tier 2, I would like for people like Glenda and those that speak directly to the Home Office to advise the Home Office whatever response you're giving to someone in Tier 2 cannot be a copy and paste of what's in Tier 1 already, and therefore you must respond appropriately based on the additional evidence they gave you in Tier 1 and address the questions that these Windrush victims are facing. Thank you very much.
Is you one ready?
He spoke earlier on, so it might be.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Garrick?
Yes, I can hear you. Would you go ahead
okay,
with...
good. Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah,
I just want to start off by saying I agree with you. Hello?
Right. So Ewan is giving us a feedback on... Right. So there's a meeting with Minister Seamer tomorrow, and he's going to just tell us what the conversation is going to be tomorrow. Go ahead, Ewan, please.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to start off by saying I agree with the last 3 speakers. And also the speaker before the young lady, we didn't get an introduction of who that person actually was. I think it's an MP. Is that correct?
Yes, Barry Gardner.
Okay, good. Right, yeah. So I'll start there, you guys. Tomorrow I'm having a meeting with the Minister for Citizenship. I wrote to her in November after initially meeting her in Birmingham, and we're going to have a brief meeting tomorrow just to discuss some of the pain points around the Windrush scandal and some of the new legislation that has come into effect in the last 2 years around historical legislative unfairness that encompasses the Windrush scandal as well, but the Home Office are not responding to in the way the legislation was intended to operate. So those are some of the key things we're going to be discussing. We're also going to touch on, I've asked her previously about the report that the Home Office commissioned into the roots of the Windrush scandal. That report is now published, and there has not been a ministerial statement or ministerial apology regarding that. It's just sitting on the Home Office's website and nothing has been said. So I will be raising that again with her. And also, the status scheme, which the young lady just spoke about, seems to be somewhat forgotten. There are many people who are still fighting for status. They're not getting the correct status and are finding it difficult to then go on and access the compensation scheme. One of the other things I'm going to be discussing with her is, and someone just mentioned it, the fact that people are having to prove over and beyond what happened to them and relive their trauma when you compare the Windrush compensation scheme to the post office scheme. The victims of that scheme are not having to prove all of what they've been through. They're accepted as victims, they are treated as victims, and they are compensated as victims. In contrast, the Windrush compensation scheme, people are having to prove things which are actually almost impossible to prove, almost having to prove negative situations where the absence of proof becomes the reason for doubt. And I think the young lady just mentioned the balance of probabilities. However, that balance is the measure that is used in civil cases. And it's, if you think of it as a scale, you basically have to just outweigh the doubt with, could this have happened because I attended school here, I had a GP.
Ewan, just going to pause for a moment, please. Just stop there. The volume is not loud enough, but I've got a sense of what you will be talking about tomorrow when you meet the minister. I'd just like to just pick up a couple of points for everybody. With regards to status, we've always said the first thing you do is to check your status before. The compensation scheme, the first hurdle is status, rectifying your status. And then if you've been impacted or you suffer loss, you move on to compensation. And that's a different story. There are lots of people raising a number of issues, and I want to direct what you've heard. So if you're asked, please, can you just...
I can't hear you, Garrett. You just dropped out a little bit. Hello?
You and we've cut you because the audio is poor. There'll be other opportunities once you've met with the minister for you to give us feedback, etc. Okay, so we're gonna go to another speaker. So we've cut you, Ewan, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. So we've heard from the Justice Clinic now, and we've heard from Glenda Caesar. I want to know if there were any specific question that came out of those two conversations before I move on. Rather than statement, I want questions. Well, yeah, Roland, I can't be holding this. Yeah, but somebody needs to take this because I can't be going around the room.
Can I ask a question, Garrett, if no one else is?
Sorry, I'm brand new to this whole Windrush thing. My father was born and bred Jamaican, and he came over in 1953. And we've never asked the government for anything. We don't do that. You know, Jamaicans get their own. I don't know who you are. Firstly, Gary, I don't know what this whole construct is. I was asked to come here because I was meeting someone else on a Windrush discussion that I was having. So I'd like you to clarify what you're doing here and what this is. I've heard from the National, I've heard from the Justice.
Is there a question that you want?
That's the question. Who are you?
Okay, so my name is Gareth Rayo. And my justice on we've been hosting yes, in the House of Commons every 2 months. Yeah, unfortunately today we have to change the venue. We would normally be over there, right? So every 2 months we have a rally where we focus on Windrush. We talk about the issues of Windrush. Before you came in, I spoke about, strategic work that we're doing with the government to get changes, to understand what is a Windrush reset, words that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have used. Fundamental change, they say. We don't see it yet. We want to understand that. When will we see it? Yeah, we have an MP here who would be going back, feeding back what has been said here and discussed, as the previous MP who came in and went earlier. So, and we've had presentation from a number of different organizations in terms of what they're doing in this Windrush space. Yeah, because, for me, it's about how we get results. We can hear all the stories. It's how we move on to get some changes with the new government. Yeah, go on.
Can I ask a question?
Discussing the justice speaking about Windrush victims. I agree. What they're prepared to do to support those Windrush. So, please, I'm not trying to do in 7 minutes. And she was pointing out to people in the room, and I was watching faces while she was speaking, and they seemed quite surprised by the things that she was saying. So I'm concerned, firstly, that you've been meeting for so long and you haven't come up to a discourse which lets you go as one voice. That's the first thing, because I think this is the same thing with this reparation thing. 2 million people want reparation, but nobody's speaking with a clear voice. So what Katie was actually saying was that the public inquiry was the next step. Because just remember, I'm a novice layperson. If the government, which was the Conservative government, has laid all these traps for you to fall down, which the MP has clearly stated, and Keir Starmer and his group has come in and said, well, fundamental change. We understand that, but shouldn't there be, and I can't remember your name, but I know you come from Justice and you work in King's College, was stating that the obvious next step would be to have a public inquiry. Wouldn't it be then permissible for all of us to get together to come up with that as a solution A?
So as a layperson, as individuals, again, one of the things that Gareth really does was that he combines all the organizations, because this isn't government funded. They are totally voluntary. So everything that they do on their own service. Some of us receive funding. So when we get the funding, we then have to collate together. We need data, because if we go to the Home Office and say, oh, I know 6 people who's been affected by this, they're going to ignore us. And unfortunately, one of the problems with us as a community is that we come unstructured, unprocessed. And no. But this is what I'm saying. It takes time, because we're all individuals going through this. One of my questions to the MP is, for example, we work as advocates for victims. I email an MP. I don't get a response because I'm not the direct constituent. How can we improve that process? Because contacting the MPs is extremely difficult. To be able to collate information and data for a public inquiry, you need collective support, and it just can't come from everywhere. You need to have legal, you need to have research, you need to have community advocacy, and that all needs to be aligned.
this meeting is part of that alignment. What questions are we doing to be able to align? And sometimes what then happens is that we come into these meetings, they get so structured and fractured away from the original point that we then have to put on 6 more meetings to cover that basic point. So what happens is, and that's why sometimes I understand Derek's frustration, because we have a focus, we have a bit, and it doesn't take away any of the relevancy of the stuff that is happening in, but there are different forums for the different questions. So we are in the process of putting together a legal inquiry, a public inquiry that encompasses several reports. We've had to go to legal barristers coming together, and then also the number of different Windrush organizations nationally. I'm just based in a charity in London, in Hackney. Yeah, for me to then reach the charities in Scotland, that takes a lot of time and coordination, and that's partly what is allowing the post office inquiry, because they've had some more financial input. And yeah, but our legal is totally pro bono. Most of our legal services are totally free of charge, which then already says they're working in their own free time away from the time that they're being paid. And this is what us as a community, Black and brown people, have to rely on, because we don't have that legal structure to then turn around and say, okay, where are Black lawyers who can then turn around, fund this and push this forward? That doesn't exist. That's what we need to ask our own community internally. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Do you see them here? So sorry. But yeah, so that was,
you just said is so important. A lot of people miss the point at the start of the meeting when I had the first MP here, and also Action for Race Equality. When Kimberly spoke about the next set of action, well, it's very important that we know where we're going with this. And I have said, strategically, we're moving towards getting better outcome, including the public inquiry. That's already started. Those conversations are already started. We already have lawyers interested in working with this group. I'm voluntary. Action for Race Equality is not voluntary. They have funds. So they were promoting their organization, and they need support. They need your help. And what Kimberly said, survey, the paper she left behind, all these points that's been raised, email, send that information to Action for Race Equality. Yeah? So you have something on paper in writing. We make a lot of noise in the room, right? And then we walk away. I want something definitive that we can work with, so we can say, okay, this is what we're going to do next, etc. And that's why what you said is so important.
Can I just close with one last point? One of the things that we've been reviewing is also other inquiries. The most recent inquiry that has come out is the Grenfell inquiry. That has taken over 7 years. We, even in ourselves, Katie, you've been this apology launched in 2018, knowing that the hostile environment was launched in 2012. So we're already looking at over a decade of impact. With a public inquiry, do you want victims to go through another 7 years before justice is seen, just to have a report to say that what we already know today, that the government messed up? So we have to be able to structure our public inquiry based on the fact that it will have legislative power, it will have impact on from the beginning, and it's not going to be time consuming, and even any process of where we have to ask our victims to go through it will be re-traumatizing, but an embedded emotional and well-being support in that, because these are the things that our community need, and that when we leave that public inquiry, the government's not going to care about how our community is, and we have to make sure that those things are inputted into it.
Thank you very much. Can I just, is it a question or a statement?
Two people online.
Followed by a question.
No, I need a direct question, please, because timing, I've got to get a few more people online. Your question, and to who is your question addressed?
Well, it's addressed to all of you.
Right, so the whole audience. Okay.
Right. Well, there are two things I wanted to say. First thing is to do with whether there have been wrongful convictions of the Windrush people. If there are methods to actually challenge it, and it needs to be done, because this is one of the ways they're going to get round and say you're not entitled to any compensation. So what I would suggest is talk to me afterwards, because I've already run out of time properly, but there are methods with the CCRC, and for Comrade Barry, I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but there's something very, very poignant that might be of use, which is a method which is almost always never used. There is a means of challenging miscarriages of justice without going through the CCRC and without going through the Court of Appeal. It stems from, you may well know, William Lord Russell. He was wrongly convicted in the 1680s, and 6 years later, he was exonerated. And they've never taken this off the statute book. So you can actually get exonerated directly through quoting the William Lord Russell case, essentially saying, I want my conviction quashed completely. And it's not going to be a pardon that basically says, I'm still guilty. It's exoneration. I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you are, it is a method that can be used. Secondly, my point regarding public inquiries is, have you ever wondered why they keep giving public inquiries? One of the reasons is that they take their time and they make sure that they cost an absolute fortune. So what I was going to suggest is something along the lines of a truth commission, because then you can say, this is the amount of money you're going to be allowed to fund each side's lawyers. This is the amount of time you're allowed, and this is how soon a decision must be made. I would suggest, and I would like your opinion on this, would it not be a better way of moving forward rather than a public inquiry?
Thank you very much for that. And don't forget, Chalice will be available so that individuals can have conversation with him afterwards.
We have some people online, Garrick. It's two of us.
Right. Okay. So,
no,
hold on just a minute. We've got only a minute left in this room, so we have to come to a conclusion now. The room is booked till 7:30. We've got only a minute to conclude. No, it's not 8 o'clock. It's booked till 7:30.
Two of us been waiting on with our hands up for a long time.
Talking about Jamaica, what happened in Jamaica, what the work that we're doing out there. Yep.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. Those in the room and those wherever you are in the world, whatever time zone you're in, thank you very much for attending. When we started this campaign some years ago, I've always been of the view that those impacted should be the main focus, and I fundamentally believe in the cure rather than the prevention. You see, if you've got an accident and someone is bleeding to death, you would not be talking about redesigning the road signs and the roundabout, etc. You'll be taking action forthwith. Why I've got that particular approach, let me introduce myself. My name is Roland Houslin from Justice for Windrush Generation. Myself and Garrick co-founded that organization. You wouldn't be at the roundabout talking about redesigning the road, redesigning signs. You'll be stopping bleeding and getting those impacted to start breathing again. Why I've taken that particular approach is that as we speak right now, I know of one particular gentleman who's going to start work at 10 o'clock tonight, finishes at 12, and he will be sleeping at the back of that bakery until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Then he'll take his rucksack and put on his back, and he'll be moving around London on the bus. That has been going on for a number of years. I've always said from the get-go that we are at a stage where we say specifically what the impacts are and call names and be specific, precise, and concise as to what is happening and who we're talking about. That's where I'm at. That's the approach I'm going to take. What I'm going to talk about primarily is my experience in Jamaica from the 2nd of November last year to the 20th of November and again from the 15th of December, last year, until the 20th of January this year, which is a couple of days ago. As many of you may know, that Jamaica has been disproportionately impacted, more than anyone else. What I experienced in Jamaica, I have good reason to believe, is duplicated across the world with those that are impacted. There is a telephone number in Jamaica, where there's a free phone number here, 0800 number, 0800 678 1925. That is the number that you'll call if you would like to apply to a Windrush scheme, and they will point you, signpost you the relevant direction, where whosoever you need to speak with, you will speak with them, hopefully. However, for quite a while, the Home Office did not realize that if you're calling from Nigeria and you're calling that 0800 number, it would not be free. You would have to have credit on your phone, so to speak, in order to call an 0800 number from outside the UK. Unless you've got a good understanding of basic telecommunication, you've done a bit of computer networking, etc., and you find some creative way, like using an app like Viber or Skype to access that number. There's no other way to access that number, because if you're in Ghana and you call that number and you've not got credit on the phone, you're not going to get very far. It's not going to let you outside the local network. That's just basic communication, which I assume that the Home Office would have skill set within their sphere, so to speak, to know that that number would not work without credit from outside. Yet they were given the impression for quite a while that it's a free phone number from wherever you are in the world. In Jamaica, they've got a number, a free phone number, 876 number, what that you'll use in Jamaica. That number was given to us prior to me going to Jamaica. That's the number that you use in Jamaica, if in Kingston, Mayfair, or wherever. You'll call that number and you will get access, and it should route you through to the whole 0800 number in the UK. I speak with someone in the Home Office, the community engagement team for Windrush, etc., etc. I got to Jamaica the 2nd November last year, start calling that number, get others to call that number using the digital GSM network, as well as the Flow network, as well as the LAN network in Jamaica. I called it a number of times, numerous times, between the 2nd of November to the 20th of November. And that I did today and get someone else to do it. And what I said, this number is not assigned. Error 4. So you take from that what you mean. The number is not assigned. That is from the 2nd to the 20th of November. I was in Jamaica again from about the 16th, because I should have been there 15th, got there on the 16th, from the 16th until the 20th. Same thing again, same approach, similar process, exactly the same. As we say sometimes, different patients, same treatment. Number is not assigned, error 4. That means the number does not work. I believe, I've got good reason to believe, that whatever is happening in Jamaica is duplicated in Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, etc., etc. But I did mention calling names specifically before. I find it very difficult to believe that the Prime Minister, or a current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, does not know that that is happening. That is on the assumption that he do care. I find it very difficult for the Minister, Seamer, that you just mentioned earlier, that he's going to have a meeting with tomorrow, to not know that exactly that is what is happening. I find it very difficult for the Home Secretary, current Home Secretary, not the one before, not the Conservative one, the Labour one that we've got today, that said months ago, if not years ago, gave the impression, and I'm paraphrasing somewhat, that she do care about the Windrush generation. Okay, hold on, Gary. We can clear the room by 8 o'clock, Gary. No, we can clear the room. I find it very difficult. We can clear the room within 15 minutes.
No, we have to clear the room now. It's been booked to 7:30.
Okay.
We have to clear the room.
Right.
Otherwise, we will not get this space again.
Okay, it is booked. I understand, Gary. Right. This opportunity will come again. Yeah. Okay, right?
So can I just say, listen, thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your experience. Can I also thank Barry Conner for supporting us as a second MC? Our first was that national event from Croydon East. Now, both MPs going to be having conversation as to what came out of this meeting today. So that is our strategic approach. Every time we have a session, it's going to be a recording of the main points that's going to go to government, right? That's what will happen, right? And so finally, the sheet that's been given, Action for Race Equality, please go online, answer the survey question, and also any concern you have, put it in an email to Action for Race Equality, because we need the evidence. We can talk all this in the room and then do nothing. Please put it in an email and send it to Action for Race Equality. So thank you very much for your attendance. Our next event is March, every 2 months, yeah, in March. So we'll be back into the main building. I will put that information out on our Eventbrite platform. Thank you very much for supporting and for coming. We're going to clear the room so we can have our conversation just outside. Yeah, please. We can just move out to the corridor and have a conversation. Yeah, just have to clear the room. That's all. What I will do, I'll send you an email. Yeah. All right. Thanks for Gardiner. Yeah. Roland, here, can you take this, please? Get the room again.
Yes, I.
Everybody's still in the chat talking, and we actually have a mic we can talk to each other. Thank you, Thank you for the best wishes for tomorrow. Just replying to some of the messages.
So is the meeting finished?
No, I want to shut it.
Say that again?
Is the meeting done? It's...
Yeah, it's finished.
Well, I thought we were going to do something after. All right then.
No, we're just here lingering.
No, that's good.